So New World just had its last open beta. If you pre-ordered, you were able to jump in. I pre-ordered, I played, and now I have an opinion I want to throw into the void that is YouTube. To set the scene, I've stayed pretty ignorant to the New World development. A few YouTube videos here and there, but no previous beta runs, no scanning Reddit or other forums for information, and while playing this open beta, I refrained from looking anything up to be as ignorant as possible for my first impressions of the game. So, like any video game, it's the graphics and aesthetics that will jump out to you first and foremost before the systems. And well, graphically, it's a pretty game. Maybe not true next gen, but it's most definitely a modern MMO, and it's going to demand more from your hardware than probably any other MMO title out there at the moment. But graphic fidelity is only a portion of the overall picture, and New World's true beauty is propped up by its overall aesthetics that holds a smooth, stylized realism that helps establish a real, yet fantastical world that embodies the grit and wonder of its colonial European influence. The aesthetics then join forces with the general layout of the map, and the sheer scale of this newly discovered island of unknown origins paints a larger-than-life picture, and one you're drawn into immediately as you wake amongst an aftermath of a storm and trudge your way through a haunted, shipwrecked beach to begin your journey. You'll find green lands littered with all matter of flora that edge from familiar to alien. Your first settlement you're sent to, that will act as a safe haven in this chaotic land, looks cobbled together by past architectural trends and anything that will hold. From my limited exploration, the diversity in biomes is a subtle one. You won't find any sharp transitions around you, but rather a slow bleeding of one biome into another. From forests to a death-stricken farmland that's withered and starved surroundings reflect the chaotic conflict that seeped its way into the island. Continue to trot on and you'll be met with a jaw-dropping vista of a swampy marsh that offers an otherworldly color palette that brings forth that mystical yet unsettling feeling of the unknown. And that was only walking through 3 regions. There was still a massive part of the map that I couldn't explore, for reasons, and the mode of transportation to facilitate this exploration of pretty scenery? Running, jumping, climbing. New World doesn't have mounts. It will have a cash shop, which currently is purely cosmetic, and if you've played any MMO, you know that mounts are a cash shop's wet dream, so we'll see how long that choice lasts. But until then, no mounts. You can find fast travel shrines littered around the map, though they do seem to be limited and sometimes off the beaten track, obviously a design choice to encourage exploring more of the map. Still, even with the fast travel, running's going to be your best friend or worst enemy depending on your preferences. I will note that fast travel requires a resource called Azoth. In fact, Azoth seems to be reminiscent to Azurite power, as it acts as a limiting factor in your overall grind. It's not too hard to come by, but a solid session of fast traveling around or crafting and you'll need to get to farming. But back to the running. Honestly, I really enjoyed the running around. That scale I mentioned earlier plays a tremendous role in this, and the overall exploration of the game and having to run from point A to point B feels like an adventure, even if it's your 3rd time running back and forth. The jumping, though, is a little weak, and climbing can be a bit glitchy. But it all adds to the overall fun of traversing the world. I honestly felt a touch of nostalgia, as if I was back playing Vanilla WoW pottering along the path towards Goldshire. But as fun as it is to run around, you're probably going to want a better reason than just because to why you're trekking far and wide. You'll be introduced to story quests pretty quickly that revolve around establishing the world and drip feed you the system New World has to offer. There are settlement quests that revolve around doing a number of things to contribute to a settlement, your gathering and crafting, and then of course your PvP questing. Now to be blunt, questing kinda fucking sucks. Kill, collect, craft, rinse and repeat. It's definitely not going to gel well with everyone and nor should it, although some of the quest givers are voiced.
That's nice. You found a fair amount of records, I'd say.
There isn't any real story or character to attach to. Even the factions only offer a bite-sized example of what they're about, and once you've made your choice, you're relegated to just picking repeatable quests off a menu. Honestly, I don't even know why the factions are fucking fighting in the first place. The ideologies presented by the factions are bare-boned and frictionless. Purple want knowledge, green wants honor, and yellow wants spirituality or some shit. None of these faction wants conflict to such a degree that decapitating one another has more value than working together to survive the island's horrors. Now, there are 2 saving graces to the overall quest setup. One, there is an extensive attempt at world building through the lore, which is chaotic magic runs through the veins of this island and presents itself in all manner of ways, one being that the residents of this island are either damned to be walking husks of flesh, or death will bring renewal and resurrection. The players and the friendly NPCs are the latter, everything else is the former. So although you'll be making your way back to kill more creatures in a rinse and repeat fashion, this fits with the idea that all you can do is stem the flow of walking abominations until some other means of survival is discovered or the magic of the island decides differently. The second saving grace is the established importance in player interactivity with each other. This will propel players to continue the grind as they tackle the crafting, player-driven economy, companies, which are guilds, and faction vs faction PvP that plays into taking over territories, and then you've also got the invasions, which will stomp your settlement to the ground if you don't help out. At least that's the impression I got from the notice board. I didn't actually get to try out any invasions. All in all though, the questing is basic and not for everyone. However, it does serve as a foundation to propel players into the world for them to begin interacting with one another. This driven player fun is either something that will work for you or it won't, and isn't truly indicative of bad design per se, but rather a design that attempts to influence and embolden its player community rather than hold their hand. Something that adds to this approach is the plethora of evolving systems that you'll interact with beyond the questing. Firstly, each territory will offer perks. These perks are earned by renown gained from seemingly doing anything to everything within said territory. The perks range from XP gains, gathering speeds, crafting, discounts, and even the ability to buy a home within the settlement that is associated to the territory. Each settlement can also be upgraded from a rustic hamlet to a bustling capital. This visual evolution by itself will prompt a lot of players to invest into the grind, let alone the fact that with each upgrade you'll be gaining access to higher tier crafting stations and more perks to owning a home in the settlement. This is where I get kind of confused though. I believe settlement ownership is company based, aka guild based. Now I'm not sure if you need a company to own the settlement to begin upgrading the town, or if just anyone can throw in some coins. But if not, this means that guilds would then have to fight each other over ownership, but can only earn the right to do so by the amount you contribute to the settlement via the faction quests. So technically speaking, your faction will earn its right to fight for the settlement, win that fight, and a company from the winning faction is selected to run a settlement, but how that choice is made, I am not sure. I'm not sure if it's the contribution points or if it's just random. I'm also unsure at this point if being from an opposite faction to the company that owns a settlement has its drawbacks that would regularly promote competing factions to retake the settlement. New World's combat is action-orientated, that plays homage to Dark Souls with its locked-in swings, paced animation, and tactical structure that opts for approaching enemies with a mind of understanding attack patterns and weighing up defense and attack. There's no animation cancelling with the dodge or block, so when you swing for damage, you're swinging. Take your light and heavy attack and add 3 active abilities and the ability to equip 2 weapons at once to switch between, and that's your combat. Personally, I found it enjoyable, and each weapon has a particular feel to it, though sound design is seriously lacking for some of these weapons. The Great Axe has wide arcing swings and a decent step forward to keep people in range, while your hatchet range is short, but the hits are fast and furious. PvE wise, the combat is visual and mostly satisfying, the real engagement being enemy AI and learning the patterns and mastering the general flow of combat. So if the enemies aren't particularly varied enough over time, I imagine players will become disenchanted by the combat loops. Now, as far as PvP goes, there is a lot of satisfaction in landing your range shots or hitting hard with an ability or heavy swing. In fact, I say combat shines in a 1v1 or even a 1v a few. Dodging and weaving around the enemy to set up your next swing or ability feels good. Now, my experience with the grander scale PvP was limited, but it was clear that a lot of conflict will probably devolve into hitting your face against the keyboard and just zerging the enemies. Not a new problem, and one that most games with large-scale PvP battles struggle with, and it's a struggle that'll be more about how Amazon Games approaches the rules of engagement. As I didn't get to try the 50v50, there may be methods already implemented to handle the chaos, and if not, it's still probably going to be enjoyable, but maybe a bit too chaotic for some players. Regardless, overall combat is fun and definitely a system that would benefit from 2v2 or a 3v3 arena in my opinion. Now, as fun as the combat is, the grounded and simplified approach to tactical play does trickle down into the overall RPG elements of your character. Mentioned before, you can equip 2 weapons at the same time. Each weapon comes with 2 trees that are comprised of 3 active abilities and 16 passives. You can mix and match these trees with a total of 20 points to spend that you'll be earning while you level your weapon up. The attributes are segregated into 5 classic stats: strength, dexterity, intelligence, focus, and con. Each attribute has 6 perks rewarded every 50 points invested, and it's all steps to reward a player with a class or structure of choice. Except honestly, I didn't feel like there was a lot of actual choice to be had. Sure, 11 weapons are nice, and they most definitely have plans to add more, but there's no real synergy between the weapons you use beyond a few mechanical implications from abilities, such as the Great Axe has an AoE hold and the Ice Gauntlet has an AoE damaging ability, so technically you could combine the abilities to hold enemies inside your damaging AoE, though the axe hold is only 3 seconds and your weapon swap is going to use up at least a second of that time. There's a few abilities here and there, but most active abilities and their passives are not just limited to the current weapon you're wielding, but also don't transfer over when you proc the passives off the weapon. For example, wielding the musket and going down the trapper tree, there's a passive called Hustle. dodge roll with the musket out, and you'll get a haste boost increasing movement speed for 5 seconds. However, that buff is only applicable while the musket is out. The moment you change weapon, the buff is gone. This is pretty much across the board. Any empowerment procs, fortifies, or grit, or disperse once the weapon that procs them is tucked away for another. This means that ultimately your weapon selection will most likely be based off a loose mechanical synergy, such as a spear to knock an enemy over and then maybe a musket to throw a trap on top, or maybe the warhammer to knock away the enemy so you can switch to the bow. But even then, most stuns and lockdowns only last a few seconds and you've got that delay in your weapon swap, so really it just feels like melee is for melee, range is for range. Don't get spicy. The true synergy you'll be looking at will be the attributes, as each attribute improves a primary weapon and a secondary weapon to a lesser degree. So Dex improves your spear, and to a lesser degree your hatchet. Int increases Ice Gauntlet, and to a lesser degree the rapier. From a glance, it seems to be 2 points of damage added to the primary weapon and 1 point of damage added to the second. Even this synergy though means that ultimately that class's system drives you to 4 archetypes: the warrior, the ranger, the mage, the healer. Now there is some flavour to have with how you build your character. So far, the life staff is the only weapon that applies a number of buffs that will persist when you swap your weapon. There's a gem to slot that can alter the type of damage your weapon will be doing and what it scales with. So for example, there's a gem that changes the percentage of your damage to nature, and that percentage scales off either your weapon stat or your focus, whichever is higher. Meaning that if you stack focus and then gem your warhammer, you could be hitting for some big numbers and still throw out a bunch of buffs for yourself and others with the life staff. A kind of paladin build. This approach could also be used for a more melee-centric caster, as you could gem your melee weapon, such as a rapier, changing the damage to an element, stack your intelligence, and benefit from the perk that increases elemental damage for another 15%. Have a gauntlet in your second hand, and you've got yourself a Frost DK kind of build. Would it be meta? I got no idea. I wouldn't be surprised if having the life staff on your back bar is a meta thing, at least for PvP. You also got a bunch of potions and oils you can craft, so bringing a Witcher build to life is going to be possible. To conclude, combat is fun, satisfying, but there most likely won't be any real variety between players, which is always a shame when you're a player like me who likes crafting personal builds and shunning the meta. Again, this is just what I was able to test myself. I do know that there are certain enchantments you can put on armor that will give you certain procs, so there may be a possibility to create a little bit more synergy between the weapons you're using and a bit more creativity to the way that you play. Ultimately, my experience in New World has been overall a positive one, with a lot of joy being had in just exploring and learning about the world and features it has to offer. I didn't get to test the dungeons out, but due to the design of the combat, I imagine they will be heavily influenced by how well Amazon Games approaches encounter design, as a bunch of bodies whacking a bigger NPC wouldn't be all that satisfying for too long. My experience with the crafting system was a limited one, but the general usage of resources didn't seem to be too excessive, and the layout of the crafting menu was clean and easy to navigate. In fact, big points for the UI in general, as it adopts a clean and minimalistic approach with an almost runic and worn finish that was very visually pleasing. Gathering could be timely, but with the inclusion of better tools and the territory buffs, this is clearly one of the treadmills you'll be running on. I didn't do any fishing, so I don't know how enjoyable that'll be, and again, I didn't get to experience the larger conflicts, such as the 50v50 PvP or the settlement invasions, but I'm excited to experience them, to delve back into the New World and continue exploring and learning. New World is by no means a revolutionary MMO, but it has an incredibly solid foundation that a lot of people are going to enjoy, and it leaves a massive amount of breathing room for Amazon Games to adapt and grow over the years. Something that I think a lot of new MMOs commonly fear, as they think they'll be content light and players will lose interest. But due to the fact Amazon is setting its foundation to accommodate a player-driven world, they'll probably have the time to innovate and grow without a mass exodus of players. If you enjoy your dungeon finders and instant content, then definitely stay away from New World. But if you're looking for that classic MMO feel with a modern sheen and tactically driven action-orientated combat, I think New World should definitely be given a chance. As of putting this video together, because I'm fucking slow, Amazon Games has announced that New World will be delayed to the 28th of September. They want to tackle some bugs, improve stability, and give a final overall polish. It'll be interesting to see what changes from the recent open beta, though I imagine won't be any grand redesigns. The small changes they do make will be indicative to what Amazon Games is going to prioritize when faced with player feedback. Definitely something I'm going to keep an eye on, because as I said, New World is a game that has a solid foundation, but depending on the path it takes to grow, will hugely impact on if the game can grow. I'm Trash Basket, this was a trash video. Hope you're having a good one. Cheers.